Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 9 of my 2022 Valentine Card Series. Today I'm going to be making a card using Hello Bluebird's Elephant Friends. So I've stamped the images I'll be using in Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock, and I'm going to be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm starting with my elephant and doing him in some warm grays. I chose W00, W1, and W3. I still wanted to keep him pretty light, so I'm using that W3 right now to lay in some shadows, just giving him a little bit of definition down the back of his body and also on the top of his trunk, since it has those little lines drawn in where it is curved. And I also am accentuating the little lines that are kind of the dimple in his leg there, and then separating the back leg from the front leg, and then blending out with the W1, and then I'm going to use that W00 to fill everything in and just make him look nice and soft. And then I'll go and do his ear. I'm starting again with that W3. And I felt like he needed a bit more definition at the top of his head there, so I did add a bit more of that in there and blend it out with the W1 once again. And then I'm filling in the inner part with the W00, although I did leave a little bit of that, just the white cardstock, because I want to add some more color to that later on, and I wanted it to show up. And then I colored in his toenails with the W3. And I went back and added a little bit of dot detail with the W3 once it was dried. It didn't show up well enough for me though, so I did pull in the W5 and just added a bit of that in there. And then I'm going to go back over those dots with the W3 to kind of soften them back up and help them blend a little bit into his skin color. And I did forget to color in his tail, but I will come back and do that later on. I just somehow missed it at this point in the video. And I wanted to push some of those dots just a little bit further into his skin. So I'm just quickly going over that with the W1. Then I'm moving on to my bunnies, and for their base coats, I'm going to use E50 and E51. I want to add some detail to them as well, but first I just want to add in some shading. So I'm using that E51 first as the darkest to kind of define the back of their bodies, and I'm doing them both at once since they're really small and quick and easy to do. And then I'm going to blend that out a bit with the E50, but still leave a lot of their bodies white. I wanted them to be just really soft. So then I'm going to add the detail in with E53 and E55. Now these colors don't always blend well together, but if you do more of like a stippling motion like what I'm doing here, it's a little bit easier. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just kind of dotting in that E55 and creating some different patterns down this first bunny. I'm going to color in one of his ears to be brown and then give him a spot on the other one, and then bringing that color kind of forward to point down at his nose, just kind of creating like a little white halo around each of his eyes, and then bringing that color down the back of his body as well. And then I'm going to move on to the second bunny, and I want to give him his own unique personality as well. So I'm going to do him a little bit different. I gave him some spots on both of his ears, and then I'm going down the back of his body as well, but I skipped down behind his neck and then started that color again on his hindquarters just to, make him look unique, like I said. So everybody has their own little individual quirks and cuteness. And then for their tails, I went back to the W1 and just added a touch of shading at the base of the tail where it's connected to their body. The duckling I'm going to do in yellow, but I wanted it to be more of a pale tone. So I'm using Y11, Y13, and Y15. I started with that Y15 and gave him some shadow down the back of his body and also on his wings. and then blended forward with the Y13 and then the Y11. I did feel like there wasn't quite enough contrast on there, so I did do a second layer of color on him with just the darkest two shades. And then I colored in his little feet and his beak with YR04. And then I wanted to give all of my critters some rosy cheeks. So I went with RV10 and RV11. These pinks are a little bit more cool toned than the other popular color that I use, which is R20 and R11. But the pattern paper that I'm going to be using on today's card, the pink is more of a cool toned pink. So I felt like this went better with that. So I did the inside of the elephant's ears and then the rosy cheeks like I mentioned. And then I wanted to just darken that up a little bit for the heart balloon. So I'm starting with RV13 on that one. I just added that to the combo I was already using, creating a little shadow down at the bottom of the heart and then in the little divot at the top, and then blending that out with the RV11, and then I'll bring in the RV10 to finish that off. The RV10 does have a lot of colorless blender in that, so it does push that RV11 out a bit. So I had to let that dry for a few minutes before I went back in with a second layer, or it would have pushed outside of the lines. My RV13 was also super juicy, so I took off the other cap just to equalize the pressure in the barrel and make sure that it didn't leak on me. And then I did that second layer. And then for the butterflies, I wanted those to be an even darker pink. So I kept the RV13 and added in the RV14 and RV17. And I'm using the RV17 closest to their bodies and blending it toward the outer edges of their wings with that mid-tone, the RV14. And then I'll fill in the rest with the highlight, the RV13. And that's just going to give me a nice dark pop of that pink that's also going to tie into the pattern paper that I will be using. And then I went back to the W3 when I realized I'd forgotten the elephant's tail. And I also took a black Sakura jelly roll pen and got it started off to the side and then went over the eyes of my critters just to make them nice and bright and shiny again. And that bunny's one eye got a little bit away from me, so I did let it dry off screen and then scraped a bit of it away with a pokey tool later on. And then I trimmed these images out with their matching dies. For my background, I'm taking a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock and I'm going to watercolor a little background using some Kitsch Flamingo Distress Oxide ink. So I just pressed that onto an acrylic block to make it a bit easier to pick up. And then I'm going to add that to my panel, and I'm going to have it darker toward the right hand side and then get softer toward the left. So I'm just adding that color and then adding some water to kind of blend that out so it gets a soft, flowy kind of watercolor look. I'll darken that up over on the right hand side and continue to blend that out until I'm happy with that. And then I did let that dry just a little bit before I decided to do some splatter detail. And so I'm just going to pick that up and tap it against my finger to give me that little speckled look. And then I'm going to set this panel aside to dry completely. You could also use a heat tool, but I just let it dry naturally. It only took maybe 20 minutes. In the meantime, I decided to trim down my pattern paper. I'm using the Simple Stories Happy Hearts collection, and I had these two scrap pieces that I thought worked well together. So I'm going to trim both of these down using the Hello Bluebird Gallery Frame number 2. So I'm just going to take those and run them through my die cutting machine, and then this is what I end up with. I'm going to take those middle parts, the center parts, away because I don't need those, and then I'm going to swap the inner and outer frame from each of these. So you could technically make 2 cards at once if you wanted to, but I decided to just make one for today. So I taped those together from the back and then was testing out to see which one that I liked. But before I start assembling, I wanted to finish off the inside of my card. So I'm going to stamp on that using some plastic flamingo ink from Lawn Fawn. The cardstock is MFT's Princess Pink, which I've scored and folded to a standard A2 size card. It's 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall with a top fold. And I'm stamping another little elephant and butterfly and the sentiment that says, "You're unforgettable." And now I am ready to start assembling. So I'm going to take that watercolored focal panel and I'm going to adhere that down to the card. I added quite a bit of glue because there was a bit of warping from the water, so I'm making sure to press that down really securely so that it will lie flat. I also added some foam tape behind my frame, so I'm going to peel off the release papers from that and I'll line that up right over top, making sure that I have an equal distance from the scallop border to the outer edge of the card on all 4 sides, and just adjusting that as needed and then smoothing that down into place. And then I can bring in my images, and I'm going to start with the elephant. I usually start with the largest image first, and he is the largest in this case, so I'm going to add some liquid glue to the back of him and kind of figure out where I want him to go, a little bit toward the left of center. And I made sure not to press his trunk down yet because I wanted to have him hold this heart balloon. So I'm going to tuck that behind his trunk and get it just where I want it, and then I can press his trunk down into place so he's holding on to that securely. Then the little bunny that's facing more forward, I'm going to put that over to the left of the elephant, and the one that is facing toward the left I'm going to add over on the right, so he's kind of looking up at that balloon. And then I also have the duckling that's going to go on the far right. So this is kind of like a group hug card. It's definitely more of a friendship card for Valentine's Day than, you know, like a love card, although it could be for whatever you want, but there's obviously like a gathering of friends here. And then I'm going to add the little butterflies up to the sky to kind of fill in some of that empty space. Then I'm taking the Hello Bluebird Paper Hugs word die, and I die cut that out of some Lawn Fawn sticky note cardstock to tie in with the color of the duckling. So I'm going to just use the word hugs from that, and there isn't enough room to have the letters spaced out, so I'm going to have them overlap just a bit on purpose to kind of just make them all squeezed in there. Plus I think it goes with the sentiment hugs that the letters are all kind of touching and hugging each other. So I'm going to start with the U, and then I'm going to add the H next. I'm using that Barely Art Precision Craft Glue because it has that super fine nozzle that just fits so nicely behind those letters. So I'm going to have that H overlapping the U and just making sure to have them at the same height though. I didn't want them to really be staggered since there's not a lot of room there to stagger them, and I didn't know if it would look purposeful. So I am lining them up at the top and bottom, but making sure that they overlap just a bit. So next is the G. I'm going to add that one overlapping the U, so the H and the G are kind of hugging that U into place. It's like a little group hug, like I said, and then the S is going to overlap the edge of the G. And I think that works well because you can still clearly read the entire sentiment. Each letter is still definitely clear enough to read what it says. So I did want to add a little bit more color to that yellow cardstock, the sticky note. It looked a little flat to me, so I'm going back to some of the colors that I used on the duckling. I'm using Y11 and Y13 to add a gradient effect down at the bottom of each of the letters. So I'm adding the Y13 first and then blending up with the Y11. And then I didn't bother with another color because I knew that when the Y11 dries back, it's going to be very similar to the color of that sticky note cardstock, so it wouldn't really be necessary to have another shade in there. I did go over it twice though to make sure that it was nice and bold, and just blended that out again. So the letters are about halfway colored in with those Copics. And then, of course, I wanted to finish off the card with a bit of sparkle. So I'm adding some Stardust stickles to the heart balloon. And I'm just adding a little bit and then using that nozzle to spread that stickles around. I also added it to the inner part of the butterflies. And I'm going to add it to the sentiment down at about the lower third of those letters. So I'm just carefully going over those. I had another clog in my stickles. I don't know what it is with these last couple bottles. I've never had an issue in the past, but the last two that I've had, they keep getting clogged on me. So I have to clean them out pretty much after every single use, but it's fine. I just used the pin from my Barely Art Precision Craft Glue, and it's real quick and easy to do. But anyway, just covered, like I said, about a third of those letters, between a third and a half, I guess, just to give it a bit of sparkle down there. And I will pick that up into the light so you can see how that glints. I just think it's so pretty. And there is another peek at the inside as well. This is the final day of my 2022 Valentine Card Series, so if you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up, leave me a comment down below, subscribe to my channel so you don't miss anything. I'm posting new videos every Monday and Friday. If you're interested in any of the products that I used today, you'll find them listed and linked for you in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 videos from previous years of Valentine Card Series I thought you might also like. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.